Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Soul Creativity. Thanks for joining wherever are at today. We appreciate it. And I'm really excited for today's episode because we have a very talented singer and songwriter and musician with us. Before we get started, I want to remind everyone to please like and subscribe and share the video. It will really help keep the program going. And I also want to mention beneath the video, if you haven't checked it out yet, there is a link to listen to our guest, Kat Thomas, her EP that's up now, and her beautiful music. So you'll be able to catch that. Also, there's a link to my website and my email address. So if you haven't yet subscribed to my newsletter, please email me or you can go to the website and do that. That way you'll be up to date on all the shows upcoming and any upcoming courses or classes. So now that we have that out of the way, I want to introduce you to Kat Thomas. And we're going to have a really good conversation this evening about her experiences with her music and songwriting. So, welcome to the show, Kat.
Hi, thank you for having me.
We're so glad that you were able to join us. I know you're busy with your college classes and work, so we really appreciate it. As we were talking before, Kat, I know that you started singing at a very early age, which I find very intriguing. Can you tell us a little bit about when you began playing guitar, how that happened, and what age were you when you started singing?
Yeah, so I mean, music was always something that's very present in my life, um, whether it just be exposure to it from my parents, like CDs, record collections, just being in the car, and you just always have music on when you're headed somewhere. And my dad was in bands when I was younger too, so that definitely gave me exposure to music. And so when I was 8, I started learning from him how to play guitar. And then I eventually kind of hopped in on his faculty rock band at JCC. So that's
And
kind of the start of everything.
yeah, JCC is Jefferson Community College
Yes.
in Watertown, New York, for anyone that doesn't know that. I didn't ask you before, Kat, does your dad do you play any other instrument other than the guitar?
Well, my dad dabbles in bass, mostly for just, playing out purposes and jam sessions. So it's nothing really intensive. And
Hmm.
I haven't really ever taken up any other instruments, no. The guitar is my choice, I guess.
Hmm. Well, you play so well.
Thank you.
Did you say you started singing right away with your dad's band, or
Well, when I first was playing out with them, I was really just working on the guitar and guitar parts. And then eventually, my dad asked me, "Hey, what are songs that you would want to play?" And so then I was able to kind of choose a couple of covers and eventually started singing some of those. Um, the first one being You Belong with Me by Taylor Swift, actually. Funny because we were just talking about Taylor Swift briefly. But
yeah. um, so you also eventually began songwriting, and I
yeah.
think you did that at a young age as well. What age were you when you wrote your first lyrics? And well, you can tell us like what inspired those early
Yeah.
lyrics, what
Yeah.
you were
Yeah.
writing about at the time.
Um, so when I first started writing, I think that was about 2 years after I started playing with the band. Because I started playing with the band when I was about 8, and I want to say the first song I wrote was assembled at like age 10. Um, and the inspiration for writing definitely came from being a part of the JCC rock band. As you know, I have been greatly influenced by Stacy Pratt,
Hmm.
and she was a member of that band. She played guitar, and sang lead vocals and backup vocals on quite a bit. And she was a writing, English, and British lit professor at JCC at the time. And so during some of the practices, we would just kind of go and we would talk about music and, I mean, common interests of music, which coincidentally, Taylor Swift, once again, a topic to be discussed, I guess. And, you know, writing and just kind of like musical interests. And when I expressed that I was kind of interested in songwriting, she offered me some like guidance and like, you know, prodding into the direction. She wanted to encourage it. She writes quite a bit, and she's a good songwriter, in my opinion, a very good one. And she gave me a pamphlet of poetry prompts at one practice and said, I don't know if these are anything that would help you, but you might want to look at them and maybe like a line will inspire you to make a song out of this, what is meant to be a poetry prompt. Because lyrics are very often similar to poems, at least in my experience. But so, yeah, the first song I wrote was out of that.
That's really interesting. And Stacy was on the show a few shows back, and, you know, she did mention, I believe, acting, you know, kind of mentoring you along. I'm wondering, when you started doing your first lyrics, you know, your songwriting, do you feel like you were really staying in, I guess I would say, genre, or, you know, doing songs sort of the same way you'd been playing with the band, the faculty band, or did you kind of already start your own sort of way of writing lyrics?
I mean, I've never characterized anything I've written as being any particular style or genre. It's, you know, it's a very fluid thing, and I don't think that, I don't know, genres and words, they feel too much like boundaries, and I don't think my music necessarily always has them, or at least in my mind, I can't find them. And so I don't think I do. I mean, there definitely was a point where like the majority of my songs had the same chords because I didn't know a ton of different playing techniques or styles, and I wasn't extremely developed as a musician yet at that point. But I think sonically, I don't think anything really resembles itself or another piece. Again, an outside listener might think differently, but that's just how I see it, I guess, the way I think of things.
So it sounds pretty original, you know, like,
I would hope.
Not necessarily, you know, looking to stay in the same vein all the time. Before I ask you the next question, I just want to remind anyone that's joining live that the live chat is up. So if you have a question or a comment, we'd love to hear from you. Just feel free to type it in, and I will get to it when I can. Kat, I was wondering, you know, you talked about your early experience in writing, and I think that's fascinating. But I do think, like a lot of children, they feel free at that age to create little poems or stories, you know, until that gets knocked out of them. So I find it interesting that you were able to stay with that, but also, you know, you just mentioned you had people that supported you in that and sort of encouraged you along the way. I'm wondering what inspires your lyrics these days, and kind of what guides you to create.
I mean, I never have just one set inspiration for my songwriting. You know, obviously everything is its own piece, as I've said. I mean, I tend to draw either from, you know, life experiences that I'm coming upon, or maybe just I find a quote from someone, or a line of a book, or just walk across something while I'm just going about my day and think, oh, that's interesting. Maybe this could become something or tie into this, or, oh, if I put these words together, they would be a really good lyric. And then I just kind of jump off of that. Recently, I could delve into my notes. I keep my songs are at this point mostly in like the notes app of my phone and computer, just because ease of access, I suppose.
Yeah.
See, in like December, I'm just giving you an example of a song I've written recently just for fun, because this feels like a good way to explain it. In December, around my birthday, I started writing a song, and it's essentially about like, recently it's been a lot of music about things that change as you move away from your home and move on to different parts of your life. So in December, my birthday was in that month, and I got like a message from someone who I'd been like really close friends with for like this good section of years of my life, like middle school, high school. And they were like, oh, happy birthday. And I was like, oh, thank you so much. And then I was like, I know actually nothing about what's going on in your life, and I haven't talked to you in months, years, even like a year and a half or whatever. And so I have let's see, 8-verse song about that whole scenario.
Wow.
Obviously it's not entirely, but it evolved. The first 2 lines are about that, and then it kind of builds, I guess you could say. But so that's a recent song I've written.
Are you the typical writer that you carry like a notebook with you to jot things down?
I try to every once in a while. I mean, right now, the notebooks that I carry around are my journalist reporter's pads, because I'm majoring in journalism. And, sometimes you just have to go out and interview people during the day. So that's really what I have for a notepad or notebook. But funny enough, I think I do have one of them that has like half of a song written down in it underneath like the transcription of an interview I did with someone. So,
well, that's a typical writer.
Yeah, it's all everywhere.
Yeah. Do you generally, like, when you get the idea or something sparks that idea for lyrics, do you tend to start writing trying to write it and finish it right away, or do you let it brew in your mind, or or does your process change for each song?
Yeah, it's definitely something that varies piece by piece. If I get an idea and I like feel like, oh, I've hit a like a spark of inspiration here, and oh, so here's my first line, and now look at the ending of this. Obviously I would like go here next, and then I'm just like whittle away at the lyrics that follow in each verse and the chorus or whatever comes after it. Then I'll just go at it in the moment. I mean, provided I'm not in the middle of something insane or busy. I need to be out and doing whatever, work, school, everything.
Yeah, all the other stuff.
But if I'm just sitting somewhere and I get something, and I'll just take out my phone or a piece of paper and get a pen and just kind of scribble down whichever ideas are throwing in my head. I mean, even sometimes, like a half-baked idea, you can later on come back to it and kind of pluck out the parts that might have been creative genius, and then kind of just cut away the things that like definitely weren't, that were just there because you couldn't think of anything else and you wanted a space saver because you needed this many syllables, or you needed it to last however long.
You mentioned your lyrics, and once you moved away, once you left home for college, how things changed. And I'm wondering if, and you might not be far enough into it yet for it to have influenced or impacted your lyrics or your songwriting. But the journalism, um, aspect, does that add another layer? Do you find that in any way, impacts what you might write about?
I don't know if I have found that actually.
Hmm.
I mean, I've had songs previously, and I mean, I still have some every once in a while now. Um, that like, oh, I see something in current events, and I'm like, this is odd, or this stands out to me in some way, or wow, doesn't this inspire some kind of feeling, whether that's shock, horror, sadness, or like joy,
Hmm.
maybe on the off chance.
Yeah.
You know, you see what you can. Um, but I think every once in a while, yeah, I do get like the inspiration from newsier
Hmm.
things, if that's a, you know,
We have
if
a
that makes
question.
sense.
It does make sense.
Mhm.
We have, and like I said, you're not that far into journalism. You
Yeah,
haven't been
yeah, yeah.
studying it that long, that I wouldn't be surprised if you see at a later time, if you revisited that question.
Yeah.
We do have a comment or a question here from Stacy, and I think it might lead into what I was going to
Yeah, I
ask you
can see
next.
that.
So, hi, Stacy. She said you have been in bands for most of your musical life, but you don't currently have a band. Do you plan to stay solo or find a band in Boston?
Um, I mean, it it would be nice. I would not be opposed to it. I am quite busy, so I
Yeah.
don't know when I'd have time. But if the occasion arose, I would certainly do something. I've contemplated, uh, you know, scoping out first open mics in the area, and then
Hmm.
seeing if maybe any of the venues fit my feeling. If I feel I can connect with them and that they would be a good place for me to play out, I might do that too. But yeah,
That kind of went
so for
along.
now, solo, but maybe
Yeah.
a band if I can. If that's
I would think that there,
an
especially
inconclusive
in an
answer.
area like where you're at, there would be opportunities for open mics and
Yeah,
be
yeah.
meeting people if
I
you have
mean,
the time.
yeah, any city is a hub for pretty much anything you might want.
Right.
So
The arts, right.
yeah.
Along with that, what Stacy had mentioned, you've been in bands most of your musical life. And this is
Mhm.
just a fun question, but how many bands have you been in, and do you remember the names of the bands?
Yeah. Um, I've been in technically three. One was extremely short lived, but we'll count it for purposes. So obviously the first was the JCC Rock Band, which its name devolved into the Lost Faculties after a point. Um, and so I was in that from ages like 8 to 12 or 13. It eventually kind of just, fizzled out because of lives and
Hmm.
whatever people had going on. And so at that point, around that point, when it was kind of still active, I was trying to form something of my own because at this point I had written like a handful of songs, probably 4 or 5, maybe. Um, or probably more than that, but 4 or 5 that I would actually eventually play anywhere. Um, Not that you need the specifics of that, but that is the case. Um, and so I had a little group of 2 people I knew at my elementary school at the time because I was in 5th grade, um, who we tried to work together and assemble some songs that we could all play together and play out. And eventually, this was during a summer month, and my mother worked at the Dexter Free Library at this time. And so she had this opportunity, or it was made into an opportunity for a gig, to play out at the end of like the summer program conclusion. And so at least myself and this one friend of mine who actually wanted to play guitar, but I had convinced / maybe slightly manipulated into playing bass for me, to play some of the songs we had written and rehearsed. But like 2 or 3 days before that gig, I was sent a message like, I actually don't feel comfortable playing out and I cannot do this. Sorry, which spun me into motion. I guess motion is the word. And I contacted Stacy and told her my predicament and how I needed to figure out what I was going to do as a solo performer or whatever I was going to have happen. And I went over to her house, and the two of us kind of worked on some of my music and like assembled a new song or two out of like small lines that I had thrown around somewhere. And then the two of us decided that we would be a duo to play at the gig. And then we called ourselves the Wonder Bats because it was a superhero themed event and I wore a Batgirl shirt and she wore a Wonder Woman shirt. So those were the three.
That's really
and that
cute.
one lasted until I was like 15? Yeah, I think so. 14 maybe, actually.
I love hearing, the creative process and listening to you talk about how you and Stacy got together and worked from some of the notes you had as a writer and a creative. That always interests me what other people are doing. Stacy has a comment too. She said, you wrote Welcome to when you were so young, and it was really perceptive about what was going on in the world. And
like
that was just
we got Ingrid eventually. Yeah, and she mentioned Ingrid. Ingrid was our eventual drummer for the Wonder Bats.
Oh, yes.
A very close friend of mine. She's very talented.
That's really nice. It kind of leads me into the question I was going to ask you next, which is what motivates you to continue songwriting and making music?
Oh, I mean, just life and, people, just anything, honestly. It's like
an easy way for you to express yourself. Like,
yeah, I'd say it's
some
emotional outlet. Sometimes a catharsis, when you're dealing with some kind of internal struggle or maybe external too, but just you need to deal with the thoughts in your head and what's going on around you and inside of your brain that you can't otherwise communicate. Yeah. Definitely. Songwriting goes for me.
That's, really what I think a lot of people, how creativity kind of happens for a lot of people, whether it's writing or dancing or, really any number of creative outlets. From talking to you before, Kat, I got the feeling that you really just like let things flow rather naturally, more so than try to force them, and that you just tap into the creativity inside of you, and the lyrics and music come from there. So even though you let it flow naturally, can you talk to us if there's any particular process for writing? Do the words come first and then you put the music in, or do you mix it up, or
it definitely varies. Yeah, it definitely varies for me. I think, well, no, I was going to say, I think a lot of the time, but not a lot of the time. Some of the time it's, I have this one thought and I realize that there's a lot more to the one thing I'm thinking, that should circulate through my head and kind of turn into something, channel outwards, through a creative vine of some sort. But I mean, there are definitely times that I've had where I've just been sitting with my guitar and like goofing around and going, if I move my hand like this, and if I take this chord and then jump to this, how does that sound? And I go, oh, I like that. That's cool. And I go, well, I guess I have to turn this into something. And so then I might, have to generate some just like new thought lyric that will fit whatever rhythm or melody I've got going on.
Mm-hmm.
Because oftentimes when I get music first, I don't really have lyrics that fit it. Yeah, that's what I've got on that end.
I think this might go back a little bit to what we were saying about creativity and expressing that inner, the inner stuff that comes up. But, would you say that creating music also feeds your soul?
I mean, yeah, it's definitely, beneficial to my entire being, like the mental, physical, emotional, everything,
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely a productive habit that I've fallen into in my life to take situations or emotions or just thoughts and turn them into something through creativity.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I know when we're expressing that, no matter what type of writing you're doing, but I feel especially, song lyrics, in particular, you're really reaching your listener. You're really connecting with other people. And
Mm-hmm.
so while you're creating from, what is internal to you and expressing that, what do you hope that listeners take away from your music or your lyrics?
Whatever they need to.
That's a good way to
um,
say it.
you know, any kind of music or creative project, art is going to connect with the viewer or consumer.
Hmm.
And obviously, no one person's perceptions are the same. Chances are the person listening to my song don't encounter the same thoughts that I had writing it as they do when they're listening to it.
Hmm.
So I just hope that they get whatever they need to from it,
And
that
that's really
whatever they
kind of,
find in it is helpful to them.
yeah. And that's really the beauty of art, I think, is
Mm-hmm.
like you said, they may not have had the exact same thought you had, or might not be going through the exact same thing, but it's,
Yeah.
you reach that point where it's universal and it speaks to other people for what they need. And it crosses like boundaries, it doesn't have to be
Mm-hmm.
somebody, of the same age or in the same exact circumstance as you. And I think that's, what's really great about it. We had mentioned at the beginning and talked about, you being a college freshman and you're focusing on journalism. And I'm wondering what role you see songwriting or music making having in your future.
Music and songwriting are always, a part of my life, a part of me and what I do. It's at this point, it's an extension of my being, I think,
Hmm.
the music making and, just playing. So, I mean, in some capacity, I'll have it, whether it's more a side thing, a hobby, a project, um, or something more in the forefront. But
Hmm.
I just, I'll go with whatever my path takes me on. I don't really
Hmm.
have a strict definition for what will be what and how every part of my life separates off.
Right. Well, that's good. A good way to think of it. And I'm sure that music and writing will always be a part of it. Um, I'm wondering if, because we're talking about the creative process, and for you it's music, um, but for anyone, especially someone like your age that is,
Mm-hmm.
maybe trying to either go out into the workforce right out of high school or, taking on a college degree, how important do you think creativity is? And I ask this because when I was teaching, I'd often have students who were in really technical fields, and it required a lot of them, but so many of them were, harboring these desires to do other creative things like writing or music. And sometimes students were able to find ways to do both, or saw a future where they could incorporate something creative into the degree they were getting. But I wonder if you have any kind of inspirational or words of advice, for keeping that creativity alive as well as the other things that are going on.
I don't know. I mean, I definitely think that, allowing a space for creativity in your life is an important thing. And I
Hmm.
wouldn't say that it's just for, the one, um, era or section of your life. I think
Hmm.
all the way through you should allow for it to exist. Um, just
Hmm.
for either, just like your overall well-being. As I said, I think creativity is important for that. Um, you don't want to live your life with like a rigidness all around.
Hmm.
Um, you need to let your mind explore, just so to have, um, freedom of thought, and just to be able to exist without feeling bogged down by everything. And I think creativity definitely lets a person delve into all that goes on in life, and can kind of maybe either push out of it and get something from it, or escape it if you need to, even. But that would be my
Well,
sort of
that's a
response
good
to that.
way. Yeah, that's actually good
Yeah.
advice. And also, I was just thinking, you yourself, if other people know that you're, creating music, gets an inspiration and an example by setting an example. And as you were talking about, letting that, all those parts of your life, it just reminds me of how important it is that we kind of honor and integrate all parts of ourselves. And we don't,
Yeah.
we're not so rigid that we have to compartmentalize everything, and we
Hmm.
can only be one or two things. So I think that's really important. Obviously, I
Yeah,
think
definitely
creativity is
don't want
really
to limit
important.
yourself with anything.
Hmm.
Like I said earlier about my music, you don't put all the boundaries and labels on something, and it makes it too constricted.
Yeah,
You want to allow for freedom, certainly.
especially in creativity, if anywhere, like,
Yeah.
you hope you have creative freedom. Well, I think we're just about out of time, Kat, but this was a really great conversation. And I want to thank you for joining us and hope you'll come back again when your schedule permits.
Yeah.
And I just want to remind everyone to, check out the link below so that you can hear Kat's EP. And, I've listened to the songs a number of times. They're beautiful. And I mean, not just the, lyrics are beautiful, and your voice is beautiful, and your music, it's really, it was just really a nice break for me to take, and stop and listen to that. So I want to encourage everyone to do that. Whether you're watching now or whether you're watching later, the link will be there. And as a reminder, next week, I just want to let everyone know that we'll be back to the 6 o'clock hour. And my guest will be Bridget Hopkins. And she will be talking about something very interesting, which is wind work, and also about clarity and impermanence. So I hope you'll join us next week. And again, thank you, Kat. And thanks for sharing all your inspiration with us today. All right. Bye, everyone. See you next week.